Macroscopic organic aggregates are important components in the turnover, decomposition, and sinking flux of both organic and inorganic matter in ecosystems. These aggregates of detritus, living organisms, and inorganic matter are known as marine snow and play an important role in transporting much of the surface-derived matter in the ocean to the ocean interior and the sea floor. Although only a small part of the ocean's total carbon budget, marine vertebrates contribute to the movement and storage of organic and inorganic carbon and influence the availability of micronutrients such as iron. A sunken whale carcass provides a massive foodful to the normally organic poor deep sea floor, with the total organic matter contained in a 40-ton whale being equivalent to that typically sinking from the euphotic zone to a hectare of the abyssal sea floor cover over 100 to 200 years. The fall of whales provides massive pulses of labile organic matter to the deep sea floor, with scientists having observed that they support widespread characteristic fauna. Chemoautotrophic communities feed on lipid-rich whale skeletons that fall to the bottom of the ocean. The input of biomass to the benthos sustains a diverse community of benthic organisms, and it has been estimated that whale-fall communities can persist on decaying cetacean carcasses for several decades. In the late 20th century, scientists discovered that whale skeletons support a chemosynthetic-based deep-sea community. Large cetacean carcasses, referred to as whale falls, provide a key resource for generalist, scavenging species and chemosynthetic fauna related to those from hydrothermal vents and cold seeps, and bone specialist species such as ossidex worms. However, how these ecosystems function is still not well understood, and due to economic challenges posed by deep-sea expeditions, only a small amount of natural whale carcasses have been studied in the deep sea. The population of large cetaceans have suffered major depredations from human whaling activities over the past 200 years. The abundance of many species was drastically reduced in the 19th and 20th centuries. Although certain populations are recovering, it is estimated that populations before whaling could be around 10 times higher than modern populations. The occurrence of whale falls has varied with time, with substantial reductions in frequency in areas that experienced intense whaling in the 19th and 20th centuries. Before industrial whaling, whale falls at the bottom of the sea were substantially more abundant. To be precise, a study calculated that prior to whaling, whale falls were 6 times more abundant than at present. Thus, the evolution and survival of whale fall specialists and the use of whale skeletons as stepping stones by vent and seep species would have occurred much more readily prior to the Industrial Revolution. Whale falls have long been considered as stepping stones for vent and seep taxa. However, it should be noted that current research does not confirm that whale falls necessarily play a role as stepping stone habitats between hydrothermal vents. A study by Stephen Keel provides an analysis of connectivity between hydrothermal vents. However, it does not provide support for whale falls playing a similar role. A key limitation is that some studies that form scientists' understanding of whale fall sites are based on artificially planted carcasses of other species, such as cows, which have dramatically smaller bone sizes and lipid content. Despite the fact that whale fall is not proven to act as a stepping stone habitat, it is still a concern that the reduction of cetacean species from whaling reduced deep-sea biodiversity by removing organic-rich island habitats and sulfide-rich dispersing stepping stones at the deep-sea floor. Although less established than whale falls, non-predation deaths of tuna and other large pelagic fish should contribute to a flux of carbon falling through the euphotic zone. However, this will not be enough to compensate for the decline in whale populations, as humans are already heavily exploiting other species. The rate of whale fall to the deep sea heavily affects the abundance of deep sea species through enhancing macrofaunal activity around the carcass. It is likely that whaling influenced the biodiversity of whale-full communities and may have led to the first anthropogenic extinctions in the deep sea in the form of whale-full specialists. Deep-sea whale-fulls create sulfidic habitats supporting chemoautotrophic communities, but the microbial processes underlying the formation of such habitats are poorly researched. Because whale-fulls harbour specialised fauna and may provide dispersal stepping stones for some deep-sea sulfophiles, species extinctions and reduced species diversity in deep-sea ecosystems has likely been caused by whaling altering the geographic distribution of whale-fulls on the deep-sea floor. Species that depend on whale-fulls are the most likely to have gone extinct, increasing the possibility that whale carcass habitats now only retain the most generalized subset of their original biota. Generalist species that have been observed to feed on skeletons of other species, such as osedax worms, are much less likely to be affected by the loss in abundance of whale-full than other, more specialized species. However, the structure of whale-full communities and other deep-sea habitats has only been studied very recently. Thus, it is difficult for researchers to evaluate the biodiversity losses in whale-full communities caused by intense whaling. However, as global whale populations start to recover, researchers may gain insights into the effects of fluctuating whale carcass supply by continuing to study whale-full ecology and biogeography. Nonetheless, future studies will have limits, as scientists may be unable to identify the characteristics of species driven to extinction as an indirect consequence of whaling. Whaling, and perhaps even overfishing, has impacted the ocean's ability to store and sequester carbon. Although these changes may be small relative to the total ocean carbon sink, rebuilding populations of whales and large fish would be comparable to other carbon management schemes, including ocean iron fertilization. The direct removal of carbon through whaling means that marine ecosystems now store less carbon than they once did, affecting the amount of carbon transferred to the sea floor. One major factor responsible for limiting the accumulation of phytoplankton in marine waters is the ability of essential trace elements, such as iron, that are required for biochemical processes such as photosynthesis and respiration. The major sources of trace elements in marine ecosystems are from atmospheric deposition, shelf sediment, hydrothermal vents, and continental runoff. Recent studies suggest that marine animals help retain nutrients in the surface waters, enhancing primary productivity and rates of marine snow. Whale excretion supports phytoplankton for excreting soluble iron, a limiting nutrient, into surface waters. Phytoplankton forms the base of the marine food chain, supporting a wide variety of marine life, from microscopic organisms to marine mammals. Phytoplankton also plays an important role in carbon sequestration by converting carbon dioxide to biomass through photosynthesis and through sinking, transferring the carbon to the deep ocean and sea floor sediments. To learn more about how this process works, please watch my previous video. You can find the link in the video description. Through whalefulls, whales act as ecosystem engineers, increasing the structural and biochemical complexity of their ecosystem. As such, the consequences of removing large fauna are not retained within the impact group, but affect multiple trophic levels within the community. The loss of marine fauna can affect biochemical cycles between the ocean and other major reservoirs. With the reduced numbers of whales, a large part of primary production is consumed by smaller organisms with much higher mass-specific metabolic rates. This greatly reduces the overall potential for carbon retention in living marine organisms compared to pre-industrial times. Great whales also partake in a number of behavioral functions, the loss of which can negatively influence carbon and nutrient cycling. Once again, watch the previous video for more information. But through all of these behaviors, including vertical migration and migration into nutrient-poor zones, whales increase primary production in the nutrient-poor photic zone and increase carbon sequestration through stimulating algal blooms that sink to the deep sea. I'd like to thank everyone who's watched the video up until this point. I like to think that the ending sections of each video are just a bit more informal. So to any people who are still watching, let me know if you prefer more formal or informal commentary. Now, back to the topic at hand. Now, one thing to consider is that the discovery of whale falls on the deep sea floor is actually fairly recent, with the first carcasses being discovered in the 1980s. And this was only a decade after the first hydrothermal vents were discovered in 1976. So this idea that whaling had negatively impacted deep-sea biodiversity first cropped up in the paper Whaling Effects on Deep-Sea Biodiversity, which was published in 1995. This paper essentially proposed that whale falls are an important source of organic matter and that they act as stepping stone habitats. Now, this paper was met with some pushback, namely this reply from Anders Hjelmert. Now, the authors said that they strongly disagreed with the claim that whale carcasses are an important source of food for the deep sea community. And they did some calculations. So they started by estimating whale biomass pre-whaling. And then they estimated the natural whale mortality contribution to the deep sea floor. Then they took into account the total surface area of the sea floor and calculated whale carbon input in tons per kilometer squared, and then compared this to the amount contributed by photodetritus. They also took into account what the actual carbon biomass of each whale carcass would be. So essentially they calculated the average contribution of whale bodies to the global deep sea by dividing presumed dead whale biomass by the total area of the ocean, as in the total area of the ocean floor. Now, what they concluded from these calculations was that the contribution of whale falls to the sea floor was insignificant, and they concluded that the amount of carbon contributed by whale falls to the deep sea was 3 orders of magnitude lower than that contributed by photodetritus. They also calculated that if whale falls were all evenly spaced across the ocean floor, that there would be 1 whale carcass for every 935 square kilometers of sea floor. And that's much larger than the size of a typical whale fall, which is around 30 meters squared. So overall their claims were that the contribution of whale falls is only a small fraction of marine snow, and that whale falls would be spaced too far apart to have any real impact on deep sea ecology. Now, the authors of the original paper did actually respond to this, and they claimed that the method of global averaging is inappropriate and that the resource presented by whale falls is unique, and it's not appropriate to compare it to photodetritus. Another rebuttal used was the fact that most modern theories of ecology recognize the importance of patchy habitats in enhancing biodiversity. And there's actually several places where these distinct spatial and temporal resources have local influences in biodiversity. It happens in several habitats, such as in urine patches on prairies, human-made patches in deserts, mangrove patches in hypersaline lagoons, horseshoe crab pits in intertidal soft sediments, and fiddler crab burrows in salt marshes. And then the authors kind of posed the question, would it be appropriate to average the impact of these patches across the entire habitat?
Now, from what I can find online, Gelman never appears to have responded to this rebuttal. Now, this was several decades ago, so it's now pretty well established that whale pools provide an ecosystem for a wide variety of unique, specialist organisms that persist for several decades. With this in mind, I think Gelman's arguments become a lot less convincing. I also agree that Gelman's calculations are inappropriate. The averaging of whale pools over the entire ocean is not as if the ecological range of these species covers the entire ocean, so it's pretty hard to understand why this was done. Also, ocean currents carry larvae or fish eggs over long distances, and marine larvae are also known to be capable of chemotaxis to locate suitable habitats or substrates. So I don't think the patchiness of these habitats actually matters much when you think about it pragmatically. Look, we know that whale pools provide gigantic pulses of organic matter, literally being equal to that seen by photodetritus over a similar area over hundreds of years. Anyway, the reply to Gelman ends with the sentence, "We conclude that millions of fooling whales are not casually removed from the deep sea without a detectable impact on the animals that have come to rely on them as a critical resource over evolutionary time." And I feel inclined to agree with them. I found this rather recent study, which seems to have slipped under the radar with only a few citations. This is interesting as it found some key microscopic fauna associated with hydrocarbon seeps, which gives some support to whale pools being stepping stone habitats. This study also contains a map of all whale pools studied in scientific literature. As you can imagine, locating a whale pool is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, so it makes sense why so few of these habitats have been researched. I'd like to thank you for watching. Making these videos requires hours spent script writing, doing voiceovers, and editing the video. So I would appreciate it if you liked the video, shared it with your friends, and subscribe for future content. Please comment down below if you have any questions or any other subjects you would like me to cover in future videos.